Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this week's module. I wanted to take a moment to introduce this week's material and then kind of dive right in. But I think this week's module is important to pay attention to. Obviously, we're on week 6 of Introduction to AI for Business, but this week we're talking about human resources and talent management and the way that AI is making an impact. I think this topic is really important for a variety of reasons. Um, one of the big advantages of AI is that it has the ability to make us more efficient, more effective, and to remove a lot of the emotions out of decisions. Um, but at the same point in time, while those are all benefits, it also risks removing the human element out of the equation. And especially in an environment that's as impactful in day-to-day lives, such as human resources, talent management, finding the right people to do the right job can be extremely challenging. But it is extremely important. And making sure that we have the right kind of personalities in these positions, making sure that we build teams that can function cohesively is a difficult project. Over the course of my career, I think the largest team of direct reports I had was about 200 individuals that reported to me. And in this environment, there was a variety of personalities, there were a variety of issues that we addressed, and it really took nuance management to be able to find and balance all of those dynamics. Hiring for new employees can be a very tedious, time-consuming, and expensive process, and it's something that I think it can have a huge impact on the overall survivability of a company. Replacing employees is not easy, and the impacts that every time you make a change in personnel has can really impact the performance of the team that's in place. So, with that being said, I think it's important to take a look at this and the use of AI in a very measured manner. I think it's important to keep in mind the human element of AI, or lack thereof, and then the necessity to still keep pace with the rest of the industry. The rest of the business, as we've discussed, is really adapting and thriving through the use of AI, and it's really important that HR and talent management be able to capitalize on the benefits of AI when appropriate. And I think that's really the takeaway for this week is knowing when and how to use it effectively. So let's talk about it a little bit more. It's hiring is arguably one of the most personal and high stake areas that AI is currently impacting. Not just hiring, but also the whole of human resources and talent management. And I want you to think about it this way. Every one of us will at some point be on one side of this equation. Either we're going to be looking for a job, applying to a college, applying to a job, or perhaps someday we're going to be on the hiring or managing team, right? And the big question really is then, what happens when those decisions, those admission or hiring or even termination decisions are made by algorithms? Well, this week we're going to explore that. We're going to look at how AI is being used in hiring, onboarding, and performance management. We're going to look at the real tools that are already shaping who gets interviewed, hired, and promoted. And then we're going to talk about some of the ethical and legal risks that come with automating people decisions. So, AI in hiring, faster, smarter, fairer? I don't know. Let's talk about it. So, we're going to start our journey by just going through the hiring process. Imagine that you're applying for a job at a major company. You're going to submit your resume, you're going to answer a few questions on the website, and then you're invited to record a one-way video interview. It sounds modern, right? Well, what you may not know is that your video might be analyzed by an AI tool, not a human. And there's a variety of tools like this, tools like HireVue, Pymetrics, and Modern Hire. They're going to analyze facial expressions, tone of voice, even word choice. They're going to score candidates based on behavioral and emotional signals and compare you to other applicants using AI-driven models. Now, on the surface, this makes it a lot easier, right? This helps HR teams screen hundreds or thousands of candidates efficiently. It allows them to make data-driven decisions, and it can reduce human biases and subjectivity in hiring. Those all sound like pluses. An example of a company who does that would be Target. They do video interviews. But if we're allowing AI to make the decisions on recommending who moves forward or who doesn't, the question is the AI fair, or is it simply automating the biases of the data that it was trained on? And we've seen real world examples of AI systems unintentionally discriminating based off of race, gender, or background. And that is rooted because the data it learned from reflected human biases. So anytime we're using AI, especially in something as important as human resources or hiring, it's important that we ask those questions. Are there biases, right? The next step that AI is kind of impacting is obviously the resume screening and candidate matching. Now, this is very, very common. We've seen this actually for decades, at least 15 years, maybe 2 decades now. And there's what's called an applicant tracking system, and it's powered by AI. It parses resumes, it looks for keywords, and it scores candidates based off of the job description. It'll automatically reject or pass applicants to the next round. An example of this would be LinkedIn Tool Insights or the Oracle Recruiting Cloud. But there's quite a few versions of this that are used. But these are used by companies of all sizes. And this helps businesses to move faster, to reduce the recruiter workload, to identify hidden talent based on patterns, not just job titles. And that's a great thing. I've used ATS for the last at least 10 years of my career, and it's been very helpful. But the flip side of it is that if your resume doesn't match the keywords, or if you don't format it the right way, your resume is probably not going to get seen by a real person. And when I say that, it's really important to understand that the formatting of the resumes can have massive impacts just based off of how the ATS actually interprets it. So it's important to understand that, but that is a huge caveat, right? Because it takes away so much from the hiring process. A recruiter can look at a resume and, regardless of the format, put it together as long as it's cohesively aligned, and then can make a hiring decision. But if exact keywords, which require individual customization of the application, are not put forth, then there's a strong possibility you might never get seen by a real person. So the question then becomes, are we designing our resumes for humans or for algorithms? And it's a real tension that we're starting to see, and we're going to reflect on this a little bit throughout this week's assignments. AI's utilization in onboarding and performance management is going to be the next kind of topic we look at. And it's interesting because we think about AI historically as part of the hiring process. Well, just because we hire someone, AI doesn't stop there. You then have the onboarding process. And in that situation, there's AI-based platforms that are designed to help automate the onboarding experience. They handle digital paperwork. They can do a chatbot-based orientation, and even provide personalized training based off of the role and behavior. This gets people productive faster and reduces administrative burden on HR teams. Performance management is another part of that, right? So AI is able to track employee performance, summarize productivity data, make promotion and raise recommendations, and even generate feedback for managers to deliver. One of the platforms that I use is Workday. Another one is going to be ADP. There's several other ones, SuccessFactors, Lattice. These are all AI-generated performance review tools. But here's where it gets interesting. If your performance is being measured by an automated tracking system, how fast you respond to emails, how often you click on tasks, does that truly capture your value? I'll give you an example. recently was in a performance evaluation conversation with one of my employees, and his direct manager was basically saying that, hey, his performance wasn't meeting standards. Um, and the employee pushed back rather forcibly, and with good cause. He was a manager of a department, and from the sales perspective, his team actually outperformed the other two teams without exception for the entire course of the year. They outsold them in units, they outperformed in all KPIs and all metrics. But his profitability for the last quarter had dropped off. Now, for the last 3 quarters, he had been number one. This quarter, he had dropped off. And there was conversations being had that perhaps, we needed to consider reevaluating his workload. Maybe he wasn't in the right position. And one of the things that stood out was that these were recommendations based off of data. So I asked the question, what's going on? What's changed? And when we took a deeper look at everything that had taken place, it was really interesting. He had taken on basically a massive project to right size some of the inventory applications and the inventory actual costing and all of that. And by doing so, it saved the company almost $500,000. By doing so, it threw off the averages of all of his performance and gross duties. Well, it was a massive help to the company, but it came at the detriment of his numbers. The reality was what he was doing was selfless and driving the best interests of the company, but from a purely AI measured data perspective, he was underperforming. So the question that we want to reflect on is what should count as meaningful performance and who decides how it's measured, right? Data, it's funny, people say the numbers never lie. But the rest of that sentence is, but you can lie with numbers, right? There's always a story to be told there, and I think it's important to understand it and evaluate it. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is bias, discrimination, and AI regulation in HR. With such a strong push towards the use of AI, we're now seeing regulations starting to come on board, and we're seeing some big elephants in the room, namely biases and fairness. AI isn't immune to discrimination, it just hides it better. So when AI is trained on past hiring data, it's going to potentially prioritize certain universities. It's going to penalize gaps in employment. It could downscore candidates from underrepresented groups. And if we don't audit or challenge these models, we end up reinforcing systemic bias at scale. So I'll give you some examples of this. There's recently a lawsuit going, or that started in California. We're going to see what happened. But there's an individual who, African-American male, mid-40s, and had applied for a variety of jobs and had been declined at all of them. Well, looking deeper, the application platform that he was using had been automatically declining his role or declining his application, simply argued based off of age discrimination. Now, the reality is it'll play out in court. We have to look at all the systemic systems. Was it his application? Was it his resume? What were his qualifications for the roles? All of those things are going to play out in court. But it's showing that biases and fairness is something that will be argued in the court of law, and there will be regulations around the use of AI to help prevent that. But if we don't audit or challenge these models, again, we end up reinforcing it, but we do it at a much larger scale. So it's important that we take a moment to kind of reflect on that and see what can happen. California and Illinois are already working on legislation. Globally, the EU is already putting, the European Union is already putting some serious restrictions on HR automation. So why does this matter to you? Well, simply put, one way or the other, it's going to affect you. You're either going to apply for a job using AI-powered systems, you're going to manage a team where these tools are available, or you're going to build a business that uses AI to make talent decisions. No matter what your role is, you have to ask, how do I make sure that AI is being used ethically? And how can I use these tools to help, not hurt people? How do I prepare to work with or be evaluated by AI in the future? Folks, I'm a huge fan of AI. I obviously live and breathe it. I think it is going to change the way that society works. But with that being said, even in the way that I've structured this course, I think it's important that we're able to still have human to human interaction. That's why instead of using automatically graded quizzes or building things that constantly adapt to your or to the questions you answer right or wrong, I choose to use assignments that allow you to think and reflect. And it's because I still want to be connected to you. I want to be able to understand where you're coming from, and I want to see your perspective. I think it's important that all of us go into this future with the use of artificial intelligence with that same mindset. We can use it to improve efficiencies. We can use it to accomplish things that were unimaginable 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 20 years ago, right? But it's important that as a species, we retain what makes us human, which is that connectedness. So this week, we're going to talk about AI in hiring and all the ways that we can try to utilize it while still maintaining our humanity. There's no doubt that AI can help us find talent. It can help us eliminate bias and support employees more effectively, but only if we build it that way. So let's get into it and start thinking about how we hire, who we trust, and what fairness really looks like in the age of AI. I'll see you this week's module, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Have a great day.